Welcome to Scene Change, a podcast by the National Federation of the Blind Performing Arts Division. All about equality, opportunity, accessibility, and the arts. Here, you'll learn adaptive techniques from performers in the know. We are changing what it means to be blind, one stage at a time. Thank you for joining us today. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Scene Change. I'm your host, Lizzy Muhammad Park, and this is part 2 of our classical piano episode. If you remember from last month, we have 3 amazing classically trained pianists here with us today, David Lai, Elizabeth Sprecher, and Eugen No. We're just going to jump right in from where we left off last month. So we're going to start talking about alternative techniques. Eugen, I understand that you created a sort of system to make it easier for blind pianists to, learn music? Could you just tell us a bit more about it?
Yeah, sure. I didn't create the system for pianists alone, but for all blind individuals who are interested in learning music. So currently, Braille music literacy is very, very low among blind musicians. I recently found out that only like 10% or less than 10% of blind musicians read Braille. And as I was studying music with Braille scores, I discovered that there are some elements in the Braille music that that does not fully express what the composers have written in a print music system. So I felt the need to teach the concept of print music to blind musicians, both to Braille readers and non-Braille readers. So I came up with this system called 3D tactile notation system, where individual notes are printed in 3D, and blind people are able to put the notes on a 5-line staff board that is raised. So I'm currently working on developing the board to play the sound when the notes are placed on the staff, so people can use it to be able to compose melody and just learn music in a new way. I just hope that more populations of blind people can learn and get exposed to music.
And where can that be found, the system?
Oh, so the website is youcanfeelthemusic.com, www.youcanfeelthemusic.com.
Excellent. And we will link that in the description as well. David, how about you? We know that you play by ear, as you told us in the last episode. Are there any other alternative techniques as far as playing the physical piano goes, or learning the music?
Well, first of all, I want to say, Eugen, I am very hooked by your idea, very much hooked by your idea. I think that is a very interesting approach to learning music, and I would love to learn more. That said, yes, I do play by ear, and I have, as I've previously said in part 1, used Braille music for a limited time, but I now mainly play by ear. Regarding adaptive techniques for piano playing, the actual performance, I do have a couple of things that I do, especially in the collaborative area. Cueing, as some of you might know, sometimes there are pieces where the pianist is going to start at the same time as other instruments, or there are times when we have to cue a downbeat for, let's say, the orchestra to come in. During these circumstances, I've now learned through trial and error that it is best for me, being the person on the bench, to cue let's say the conductor or the violinist or the whatever, and then from this angle, as long as we are able to work out a good system of cueing, either by breath or by movement of the head or a combination of both in certain ways, then things will be hunky dory. Um, or shall we say, smooth sailing. Apart from that, I would say other types of accommodations. I I don't think I can think of any right off the top of my head, but I think this is probably the most significant for me, as far as uh, especially interacting with other people is concerned.
You memorize a lot though, don't you?
Well, don't we all? Yeah, so blind or sighted, braille music or not, or music or no music, we do memorize a lot of things. For playing, even for jazz musicians, they have to know the chord chart, to be able to sort of jam and things like that. So in a way, we all memorize. Um, for me, I find memorizing to be a very um, interesting journey. For some days, I would feel like, oh, how come I haven't still gotten this down yet? And other days, I'm like, oh, this is so simple. I could move on. I think for me, I'm just taking things, breaking it down part by part, and also working out some of the difficulties right from the start as I memorize. So when I really start to build my own interpretation, things are already rolling as far as the eventual mastering of the piece. By mastering, what I mean is to be able to play without thinking about what's coming up next. And yeah, speaking of which, I do have to interject one last thing, and that is a couple of my colleagues from Cincinnati Conservatory of Music, they've actually done a case study of how I memorize and how I learn music, mostly through how I learn music through recordings, both actual up to tempo real performances and other things. So if you're interested, I can also send this to Lizzie so that you can have this in the description. But this
Please.
might be an interesting dive into this if you would like to learn more.
That's fascinating. And Elizabeth, the question for you is what is your favorite um, alternative technique for playing classical piano and why?
Well, so I also use Braille music, but sometimes I use both Braille and ear, or sometimes I just use my ear. And how that works is for Braille music, I use it when like I can really understand what is being shown on the page. And then I use Braille and ear, like my professor or someone will make a recording and the keys like hand separately and then hands together, and then I'll use the Braille music with that so that I know like what notes go with what, so that I know what I'm reading. And so, and by ear, sometimes I'll just use my ear if like I have to learn something fast, or uh, yeah, or I'm not really sure like what I'm hearing or things like that. And in terms of playing with someone, an alternative thing that I would do is have like if we're starting the piece at the same time, having them breathe in like sniff like, and so that really keys me in as well as keys them in. Or sometimes if you're having rests and you're collaborating with someone, I'll use my wrists or my arms like to lift up a little bit so they can kind of see what I'm doing. But um yeah, it's all about communicating with the other person. So
That's really true. Communication is so important. And I know you spoke before, Elizabeth, about sometimes music is not available to you, or maybe the most up-to-date version is not available. Are those times when you would also play by ear?
yeah, like if I was learning more repertoire that is on the contemporary side, for example, like one time there was a piece for a trio, me and two wind instruments, and it was a more modern piece, so it wasn't really available in Braille, so I had to learn it by ear. But I also like learning by ear because it's really fast. And and it doesn't take me that long to get it, but there are so many more benefits to having the Braille music as well, especially when you're in more control over like the timing that's being shown on the page, and you know that and you have that for yourself. And so that also provides more of that independence as well.
That makes perfect sense. I mean, that's the whole point of non-visual techniques, is the ability to mix and match them for the success of the performer, the musician, whatever it is that you're doing. So we're gonna jump
Yeah,
into
and then
mm,
oh, I'm sorry.
nope, go ahead.
So then, also in terms of Braille music, another thing that we often by ear that we might miss out on is the dynamics that are written on the page. Obviously, by ear, you can listen to so many recordings. I mean, if you want to, but you're gonna find that a lot of performers do something different, in each recording. But with Braille, you see the dynamics for yourself. And so that's also another thing. And you know which notes are accented and which notes have slurs and which notes have ties. I mean, you don't see all that stuff in ear all the time. So that's why it's really good.
For sure. We're going to jump into the next question, which I'm going to start off asking Eugen. So, Eugen, you are playing a rather challenging piece. Maybe it's got quite a fast tempo, and you got to make this jump. Maybe it's a huge interval, or you're on one side of the piano, you need to jump to the other side of the piano without looking at it. As a blind musician, how do you do that?
That is a great question. Yes, leaping on the keyboard. Suppose it's one of the most challenging aspects of playing the piano as a blind person. But I think leap is a challenge for everybody, because I heard that even from my sighted colleagues, when they're in the music, they don't really look at the keyboard. So I guess among musicians, um, eyes are not uh, the the most helpful, um, um, that helpful uh, that helps you to guide your hands. It's much more of your muscle memory. That's just my opinion. But when I had big leaps and challenging passages in the music, I used to put like a sticker on a keyboard just to measure the distance between the keys, and try to orient myself and like get get to that specific key, looking for the sticker. I started out with that, but then eventually I had to learn to rely on my physical muscle memory, to really get the distance, and being able to play without actually skimming the keyboard. So, I mean, when I was a kid, I used to use that sticker method a lot, just putting stickers everywhere, to measure the distance. But nowadays, I don't think that is as helpful. I mean, it's now that I played piano for so long that I know have a general idea where the keys are and how I can kind of control my self just freely. So I don't know, maybe other blind pianists have other tips, but for me, I think the main tool that I used in the beginning was the sticker.
Sure. And that's really useful and helpful advice.
Mm.
David, how about you?
Yes, I would say both for blind and the sighted, for everybody actually, I should say, leaps and also like huge passages of endurance, or shall we say stamina, things like that can be very challenging. But speaking to leaps, I'm currently preparing a piece that does have a very bad passage.
Mm.
At least for me, I find that, especially on the left hand, you have to do a lot of these things. And so what I do is I first of all start very slowly, and I feel this distance between the keys, and I find a fingering that would be very useful for me. And now, like what Eugen said, it's kind of like the muscle memory thing. But one of the things that I learned over these many years is that the keyboard is not a straight line. I used to think that the keyboard is a straight line and you can kind of get from one point to the other. Well. But the keyboard is more, sort of circular slash curved slash whatever way you can sort of employ to sort of describe it. And because of this, it's best to sort of imagine the leap in such a way that would allow the arm and the forearm and the wrist to work together with the hand to guide eventually the hand to take that transition from one point of the keyboard to another.
That was a really good description of how the keyboard is laid out. That was a really good description of just what to do in a really technical sense. So thank you for that. Elizabeth, any tips from you?
Yeah. So to add on to what David said about using the forearm and the wrist to help leap, some other strategies that I use that I learned how to use more are the sets of 2 and 3 black keys. And so to really use those as the landmarks. So if I was leaping from a low A to a high A, so I might use like my pinky to kind of feel the inside of that third um, set of black key, the third one on the right, and I might just like be right there on the A. So that's another strategy. I also like to imagine the sound in my head before I play it. Because I feel like if you can hear it inside yourself internally, your hand will just go there. And you will automatically know how to get there. And it's all about mental practice, like practicing it in your head, seeing yourself do it before you actually do it. And that's another strategy. I love feeling like a little bit of the distance at first, but then trying to kind of rely on those landmarks.
Exactly. That sounds a bit like that muscle memory that Eugen was talking about. So we're just going to move into the next section, which is about performance. I'd like to know to have a successful performance, obviously you have to practice and just really make sure that you know your stuff. But beyond that, I'm thinking of navigating the stage, where you're using a cane, a guide dog, sighted guide, just, I don't know, you have the stage memorized. Um, what goes into a preparation for you as a blind musician?
Yeah, so I think the main key uh, or successful performance is a communication, maintaining good communications with sighted people. Um, in terms of getting on the stage, I need to get familiar with the environment. So I make sure that I do plenty of rehearsals before then. So I know how many stairs I need to take, for example, to go up the stage, or what kind of turn I need to make to get to the piano. And I make sure I use sighted guide a lot. So I let the person know I need to be on the edge of the piano to be able to bow comfortably. So stuff like that, like little details. I let sighted people know what I exactly need. And in terms of performing, collaborating with sighted people, I I have played with orchestra conductor 2 times, and when I did rehearsals, I said, okay, I will be nodding when I'm coming in, or when we need to play together, or when I need to give some cue. So conductor sort of needed to pay attention to my head to make sure that everyone is on the same page. So stuff like that, little details, just letting people know what I need is the key for successful performance.
I love that. And thank you for those very specific tips too, because people can use that. You know what I mean? In their piano performance. David, how about you? Do you have anything that people could steal?
Okay, this is something that I learned from my professor, my current professor, Professor Krieger, who we were talking, just randomly about adjustable benches, those artist benches that you usually get to see in concert halls. Usually, these benches, you can turn a sort of a knob or something like that to make it rise or fall. And the problem is, for me at least, is I do not know what direction I'm turning. It's like clockwise or counterclockwise. What I was told by my professor is if I put sort of my knee at so there's a section of the bench that kind of goes up and down. So if I sort of like put my knee there, I could feel how where the bench is going. That's kind of how I make sure that the bench is always at the right height. Of course, another way to do it is just adjust beforehand. If you have beforehand before the performance, you can definitely do that. Also, like what Eugen said earlier about communication and using sighted guides. I also use sighted guides as I sort of rehearsed, of course, and as I navigate the stage.
Elizabeth, how about you? You mentioned lifting your wrists earlier. Anything else that you do for a successful performance?
Yeah, so in terms of navigating the stage, I would have usually time to warm up before a recital. And so what I would do during those warm up times is ask the concert assistant or the person working backstage, like, is the piano like close to the center of the stage? Is it close to like the left side of the audience, meaning stage right, or things like that. So it's also a good idea to know some sort of stage direction as well. And depending on that, I will use part of that warm up time a little bit to just kind of practice walking back and forth a little bit from backstage to the piano to backstage again, so that I know that once I am in the performance, I will know which way to go more efficiently. And in terms of finding the bench, because I know that's something else, I always like to position it during the warm up, and then once I'm at the piano, I will kind of use like the back of my hand to find the piano. That I usually put my cane down there, so like don't be afraid of taking your cane with you on stage. And then I will use, kind of like the direction towards the audience. So I'll walk around behind the bench and then closer to the piano again until I touch the piano again with the back of my hand. And then that's where I'll know to bow. So, facing the audience. And then I'll turn left and I'll sit on the bench. So that's kind of how I do it. And I guess the more you do it, the more it becomes a bit more subtle. So a lot of people, don't really it's kind of done smoothly. So a lot of people don't notice and it looks like you really know where you're going and things like that. And so yeah.
You should do like a short tutorial on that, like everything that you just described, but like describing it in more detail and like with a video, because I'm sure that would help a lot of people. Um, so we're going to now move into the more education and career aspect of classical piano. I'd like to know from each of you, what advice do you have? What advice would you give someone who's interested in making a career of this, becoming a classical pianist? Is this something that requires graduate school? Um, are there any, I know Eugen, you've done some, what is the word I'm looking for? Some musical programs and things of that nature. Um, what does it take? And I think we're going to actually start with you again, Eugen. I think we're going to go Eugen, David, Elizabeth for this one. Um, I'd love to hear any advice that you have.
Sure. Um, I personally think going to graduate school, a graduate education is necessary because classical is such a sophisticated era. The I, we need to practice. We need to spend hours, commit ourselves to practicing, making music, um, and being able to collaborate with others. Uh, so high level of education definitely helps you to shape your music. And um, I went to the conservatory um, for for 6 years, um, and I think there were advantages in being in a conservatory environment and also some disadvantages. I had a privilege of really getting into my instrument and solely focus on music. But the disadvantage I feel that I missed out is something that I wanted to have a little more rounded education, what more kind of well-rounded. Um, um, I wanted to hang out with people who are non-musicians, but I didn't have that much opportunity. So that's something I miss. But so I think it's more of a personal preference whether you want to study in a conservatory or a university. Um, but I think in order to really establish your career, um, I I highly believe that you should have really um, strong skills and confidence, um, and as well as a well-established collections of repertoire.
Kind of building on what Eugen was saying earlier about repertoire, this is very important to have a well-rounded collection. You'll need to at least know, to a certain extent, a good collection of solo, chamber music, and concertos. And for me, I think graduate school has brought me closer to both um, things that we have to grapple with in both interpretation of the repertoire, as well as the social aspects, the performances, the uh, because I study at universities in the U.S. I have instead of a sort of a music only sort of background, I'm surrounded by people who are, other majors. I even teach a couple of classes where the students are from other majors and they want to learn the piano. And so to be able to interact with people from different backgrounds and different walks of life, that's something that is very enriching for me personally. And I think that kind of is a byproduct of going to graduate school and for my part, studying abroad in a different country. Um, so yeah, it's all about exposure and preparation.
My goodness, we could have an entire episode just on conservatories versus universities and playing abroad versus playing in the US. Listeners, if you'd like to hear that, if you'd like us to invite these guests back to have those discussions, let us know in the comments on YouTube. Let us know via email nfbpad@gmail.com, because we'd be more than willing to make that happen for you. Elizabeth, I know that you're still in undergrad, but I'm sure you're thinking ahead. What have you heard about graduate school, about the university versus conservatory situation? What's your take on this?
So for me, I'm kind of in both university, conservatory, like studying. And so I'm sort of studying at sort of a conservatory level, but I'm also studying in a university. So it's a little bit of both. And so what it really did for me was provide a lot of well-rounded perspectives, on a musical sense, but also on a non-musical sense, on an academic sense as well. And so, and I think that going to a master's is so essential. I like it's the thing about undergrad versus masters is that like a master's is more specialized. You are focusing on just that, whereas undergrad you have your the general ed requirements, and you have all those other classes and things like that. But in grad school, it's like you really get to focus on the more like other aspects of how can you really put this towards a career. It's even getting closer to next step towards a career. How can it lets you focus on like the like if you a lot of because how a lot of grad schools work is that you get in with the sort of assistantship. And so what those assistantships, graduate assistantships or teaching assistantships or accompanying assistantships, and what it does is it helps you gain more of the experience in teaching, accompanying, or whatever that is, towards like the next step of your career. So it is a little bit more specialized in that way. So I cannot recommend it enough.
Excellent. Eugen, back to you about some of those music competitions that you've done. I know you did one. The name is escaping me right now, but our very own Caitlin McIntyre did it. Is it called VMA or VBMA, or it's something? I suppose you did it a few years ago. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yes, I mean, I have entered some competitions back in 2012, 13. Um, um, yeah,
Do you
it was,
recommend them or?
um, yes, it was a good learning experience for me, but I recommend not to devote your whole life into just winning competition. I mean, I know some musicians are really obsessed with winning a competition, getting a prize, getting your name, publicize your name that way. But I mean, uh, I think there are merits and disadvantages at the same time. You can solely focus on what you do, but competitions can wear you out. I mean, I got really burned out after trying out um, different rounds, and um, by the end, I seriously thought about taking a few years off from playing the piano because of the pressure and the stress I went through. But I think the younger you are, um, you can learn much more from just trying out competitions. And it's good to hear others playing and just expose yourself to other musicians and hear constructive feedbacks from the judge. I think there are many advantages over trying out competitions. So those of you who are interested, I say yes, why not try it out? But for those who are just not really sure or are a little intimidated, I'd say you could reconsider it. So it really depends on where you are in your musical journey. Um, and I think, yeah, I think a competition is certainly a great learning experience.
That's good to know. And listeners, if you have any more questions about competitions, what they are, what they entail, we could have a whole panel with Caitlin McIntyre, Christina Jones, and you Janelle all together, just sharing different aspects of competition life. If our listeners are interested in something like that, please do let us know yet again at nfbpad@gmail.com. Well, that's basically our show for today. I would love to give you all a chance to let our audience know where they can find you. And Elizabeth, we're going to get started with you. Any social media, YouTube, or anything else that you'd like our listeners to know before you head out, perhaps what you're working on right now or where they can listen to your music.
Yeah, so right now, the way you can find me on YouTube is by searching Elizabeth Sprecher Piano. That's Elizabeth, and then my last name Sprecher, Sprecher, and then piano. And you'll find several videos, my most recent being my senior recital, and then some from the past few years as well.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure having you on the show. And David, how about you?
Well, if you can search on YouTube again, my what do you call this? YouTube handle. This is a new feature that the YouTube algorithm has done, and I jumped aboard. So my YouTube handle is David Lai 1996, all in one word. David, with the first D not capitalized, and then LAI, that's Lima Alpha India, 1996. Everything is all in one word. Hopefully that helps.
Excellent. Thank you so much for joining us today. And Eugene, where can they find you?
Yes, so if you want to find me on YouTube, you can just simply type my name, Yoojin, Yoojin, 2 words, and Noh, no. Um, I haven't been able to upload much performances since the pandemic hit. I wasn't able to do a lot of performances recently, but I plan to upload some more. And please feel free to check out the website, www.youcanfeelthemusic.com, for future prototype on the 3D tactile music.
Excellent. We are so glad that you were able to join us today. And we were able to scrounge something up from Eugene's YouTube station, and that is what you will be listening to right now. Thank you all for joining us. This has been another episode of Scene Change.
I'm Caitlin McIntyre, President of the National Federation of the Blind Performing Arts Division. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Scene Change. If you like what you heard, be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and visit our website at nfb-pad.org. There you'll find links to our social media, membership, and resources for blind performers. Thanks to everyone who makes this show happen. Scene Change is produced by Shane Lowe, Joe Schuneman, Precious Perez, Chris Nussbaum, Seyun Choi, and Aaron Jordan, with music by Ryan Strunk and Tom Page. Remember, you can be the performer you want. Blindness is not what holds you back. We'll see you next time.